We have now reached the end of our journey through the SQL fundamentals. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hoped that you learned something new. You hopefully now have some understanding of the different components of SQL queries and the order in which they work and how they come together to allow us to do what we need with the data. Now, of course, learning the individual components and understanding how they work is only half the battle. The other half of the battle is, how do I put these pieces together? How do I use them to solve real problems? And in my opinion, the response to that is not more theory, but it's exercises. Go out there and do SQL challenges. Do SQL interviews, find exercises, or even better, find some data that you're interested in, upload it in BigQuery, and then try to analyze it with SQL. I should let you know that I have another playlist where I am solving 42 SQL exercises in PostgreSQL. And I think this can be really useful to get the other half of the course, which is doing exercises and knowing how to face real problems with SQL. And I really like this playlist because I'm using a free website, a website that doesn't require any sign up or any login. It just works. And you get a chance to go there and do all of these exercises that cover all the theory that we've seen in this course. And then after trying it yourself, you get to see me solving it and my thought process and my explanation. And I think it can be really useful if you want to deepen your SQL skills. But in terms of how do I put it all together, how do I combine all of this stuff, I do want to leave you with another resource that I have created, which is this table. And this table shows you the fundamental moves that you will need to do whenever you do any type of data analytics. And I believe that every sort of analytics that you might work on, no matter how simple or complicated, can ultimately be reduced to these few basic moves. And what are these moves? They should actually be quite familiar to you by now. So we have joining, and this is where we combine data from multiple tables based on some connections between columns. And in SQL, you can do that with the join. Then we have filtering. Filtering is when we pick certain rows and discard others. So, let's look only at customers that joined after 2022. Now, how do you do that in SQL? There are a few tools that you can use to do that. The most important one is the where filter. And the where filter comes in action right after you've loaded your data, and it decides which rows to keep, which rows to discard. Having does just the same, except that it works on aggregated fields. It works on fields that you've obtained after a group by. Qualify, we actually haven't seen it in this course because it's not a universal component of SQL. Certain systems have it, others don't. But qualify is basically also a filter, and it works on the result of window functions. And finally, you have distinct, which runs quite at the end of your query, and it's basically removing all duplicate rows. And then of course you have grouping and aggregation. And we've seen this in detail in the course. You subdivide the data on certain dimensions, and then you calculate aggregate values within those dimensions. Fundamental for analytics. How do we aggregate in SQL? We have the group by, we have the window functions, and for both of them we use aggregate functions such as sum, average, and so on. And then we have column transformations. So this is where you apply logic, arithmetic, to transform columns, combine column values, and take the data that you have in order to compute data that you need. And we do this where we write the select, right? We can write calculations that involve our columns. We have the case when, which allows us to have a sort of branching logic and decide what to do based on some conditions. And of course, we have a lot of functions that make our life easier by doing specific. Next, we have union. Union is pretty simple. Take tables that have the same columns and stack them together, meaning put their rows together and combine them. And finally, we have sorting, which can change how your data is sorted when you get the result of your analysis, and can be also used in window functions in order to number or rank our data. And these are really the fundamental elements of every analysis and every SQL problem that you will need to solve. So one way to face a problem, even if you are finding it difficult, is to come back to these fundamental components and try to think of how do you need to combine them in order to solve your problem. And how can you take your problem and break it down to simpler operations that involve these steps?